Hello, everybody, and welcome to the December version of Community Conversations. And we have a blue chip panel with us this morning, started and orchestrated and organized by Angela Smith, who's with us. Linda Fantasia, our health officer, is with us, and I'm happy she's with us because I know she must be the busiest person in town right now. Making sure that everyone who wants to keep activities as normal before the COVID, but asking her for permission to do this, that, and the other thing, everything from Halloween to concerts at the churches to Santa coming to town. So Linda, I know you could easily have said no to everybody that wanted to do all these creative things, but instead you found a way to help them make it happen in a safe way. And our hats are off to you and all that you've done. Nancy Jussain is here. She's representing the Friends of the Council on Aging. Nancy had been our president until Jean Bezhnowski took over that role for this year. And Jean's husband, Chuck, is our producer, as our stalwart producer, as he always is in these once-a-month sessions. And he's recording, hopefully he's recording this session, and it'll be available to anybody that wants to see it on demand or at Minuteman TV or at YouTube. So you can get at it whenever you need to if you'd like to see more about today's program, which is all about COVID and the vaccine, and couldn't be better represented and provide better information than Jean Barry, Dr. Jean Barry, who is also a member of the board of the health department. And you may know Jean from her activities with the library and the art at the library. You may know her from her role as a board member at the school association. You may be a patient. You may have seen her doing research or teaching or volunteering in parts of the world. She trained first at Dartmouth and then at, I believe at, I'm blanking on your master's degree. I think it was somewhere in Washington, D.C. Is that correct?
Georgetown.
Georgetown, of course. And instead of staying on at Georgetown for a Doctor of Medicine degree, she went to NYU School of Medicine, got her NYU School of Medicine degree, came back to Carlisle to practice. Her private practice is in Concord. She has also been elected to the health board as of this most recent election. And we are so fortunate to have someone with her credentials and also her willingness to jump in with both feet and help out in this critical time that we're all facing. So I know you all have questions. You'll all have questions about the rollout of the vaccine and other things. I know everybody that I ask about the vaccine has said, gee, I'm not sure I'm going to take it, be the first one in line. Everyone is a little skeptical, a little wondering about all of this. And Jean is here to shed some, separate that, as they say, separate the signal from the noise and separate and shed some light on this topic. So Jean, I'll just turn it over to you. Let me ask Angela if she has any comments before we get started. Angela, you'll have to unmute. Oh, maybe we're fortunate to have Angela on mute for a change. Oh, there she is.
Sorry about that. I just want to welcome everyone and say happy holidays. And I am so pleased to have all of you here. And Joan sends her regrets. She had some conflict, so she couldn't be here today. But we just want to wish everybody a happy holidays and make sure that they are staying safe and doing all the right things when it comes to the virus and wearing masks and using gloves and staying socially distant. So with no further ado, we should go right to Dr. Barry and Carrie and enlighten us to what's going on and what we should be doing to keep everybody safe. Thank you.
Good. Jean, the platform is yours.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Can you all see that?
Yes,
Great.
loud and clear. Great.
All right, perfect. Sorry. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking, I am Dr. Jean Barry. I'm going to be talking about COVID-19. I'm an internist, and like Carrie introduced me, I work locally in a private practice. So just to add some artwork to make it a little more visually interesting. So I have no disclosures, no financial interests, unfortunately. So hopefully unbiased. The important thing, I think part of this is going to be cut off by the faces on the right that you see. The important thing is that this is not intended as medical advice. I do have several slides in here that give specific doses and supplements, but I do encourage everyone to discuss any specifics with their physicians or their healthcare provider before embarking on any kind of prophylactic or treatment program. And also, because of the rapid pace of COVID-19 research, the information presented here may not be valid in the near future. So just to give an outline of what I'm going to be talking about. So just going to be talking about brief background to COVID, symptoms versus the flu, disease timeline, as well as treatment for outpatients and prevention versus inpatient. I will not dwell on this because that's not of concern to us. And I'm going to be talking about the vaccine, what's available, what's going to happen in Carlisle, and most importantly, FAQs. So just the background of SARS-CoV-2, it's a novel coronavirus. We all know these things. We've heard this in the news over and over again. Typically causes mild respiratory symptoms or GI symptoms, typically found in animals such as pigs, bats, camels, and cats. And we've had several previous outbreaks of similar viruses in the past. Looking at cases globally, this was last night at 9:30, we have 73 million cases currently, and this is probably a huge underestimation of how many actual cases there are, and 1.6 million deaths globally. Here in Middlesex County, I was actually kind of surprised. I didn't think that we'd be on the top 50, but apparently Middlesex County has 59,000 cases, 59,835 to be exact, and this is top 50 in the US, top 50 counties. And we're in the top 20 for deaths. So we have 2,538 deaths. So this is the depressing stuff. I didn't realize we were as bad as that until just last night. So risk factors, we've all heard these things over and over. These are the people that need to be extra cautious. And these are the people that really would benefit significantly from getting a vaccine. So this is a huge percentage of the world's population. This is about 1.7 billion people. So 22% of the world's population. And these people may be at increased risk. We're not certain, the data is not out there to truly support this, but just logic tells you that these are people that are generally have weakened immune systems and may be susceptible to various infections. Now, in terms of COVID symptoms, this is the interesting thing. Wherever you look online, when you say, you do a search, what are the symptoms for COVID? It's all over the place. So the CDC has been expanding this to include all sorts of symptoms, including sneezing. So that's something that doesn't happen very often, but things that you don't typically think of with COVID. So the key take home for this particular slide is if you have been exposed especially, and nowadays right in our area, we're seeing a huge spike. So all of us could have been exposed just, with minor interactions with other people. If you present with maybe some muscle aches and maybe some runny nose, maybe a single bout of diarrhea, that might actually signify that you have COVID. So you should have your feelers out if you get any of these symptoms. And it's just, these are really common symptoms. These are not things that people usually go to their doctor for. If you have a headache, if you just feel a little fatigued, a little short of breath. This is the interesting thing. A lot of patients have this. Not every single patient has shortness of breath, but quite a few. It's a very common symptom, far more common in COVID than in the flu. So just be on the lookout. If you have any of these symptoms, get tested, call your doctor if you feel that you're a high risk patient. And how can I tell if I've had the flu or COVID? So if you're having any of the symptoms, the first thing you have to ask is, have you been exposed? Do you know anyone that has the flu? Do you know anyone that's had COVID? Have you had any kind of significant contact with them physically? Being within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, even with a mask on, that can count as an exposure. With the flu, you really can't tell the difference. They're almost identical. You look at, people manifest differently with the same virus. And, one person might have something that looks just like COVID and they actually have the flu. And then we're seeing this more and more in urgent care clinics in our area. So typically, though, the flu is often rapid onset. You'll see fevers right away. You'll feel sick. You're on the couch. You're in your bed. You're knocked out pretty fast. That's a typical course. With COVID, it's a little more gradual typically, but not always. Sometimes people can feel sick more quickly. But in a minute, I'll show you a really nice graphic that demonstrates why COVID has kind of a slightly different clinical course. And more specifically for COVID, you might actually experience a loss of smell or taste. That is far more specific for COVID. You might get the COVID toe, which is like a purple red, it's called chilblains, where you have vascular changes in your toes more specifically than your hands, your fingers. And ultimately, testing can be very helpful. But again, both of these tests, the PCR test and the rapid antigen testing for flu, they have limitations. They're not perfect. And both have far less than 100% sensitivity. But the PCR test is considered to be the closest thing we have to a gold standard for COVID, but we really don't have a gold standard. And then just differentiating the seasonal flu versus COVID in terms of infectivity, far more infectious. So this is something in our area that we're definitely seeing, but we are seeing this as well. So it's a toss up. It could be either one. So if you do have symptoms, it's a good idea to actually go be evaluated, and they will do a swab for both of these. Incubation time, you're looking at a far longer incubation time, 14 days. Most people, it's shorter than that, but a few, it can be up to 14 or so days. So the exposure might be 10 days ago, and you might completely forget that you were exposed to someone who may have ultimately ended up being positive for COVID. And so for flu, it's a little quicker, right? So it's only a few days. Hospitalization rate, COVID is far more dangerous, and fatality is far more dangerous. So this is the graphic that I really, really like. And the key thing to pay attention to is you have two different disease processes here. So you have mild COVID, and then you have severe COVID. The critical difference is this inflammatory phase. This does not happen. This is an exaggerated inflammatory phase in the second week and beyond of COVID. This inflammatory phase does not happen with the milder cases. And the higher risk populations that I went over before, or actually I think I have that in a future slide, those are the people that have much higher risk of this disease outcome. But they might have the mild version too. There's really no way to tell. So the key difference is, if you look, you see the viral shedding increases, and you have this asymptomatic phase where you can still be infectious in both of these. You can be sharing the virus with your friends and family and have absolutely no idea for about 2 days. That's a typical length of time. And then you start to have this inflammatory response. You may have symptoms, you may have runny nose, sore throat, maybe a little diarrhea, things like that. But the fevers, the really heavy symptoms, the shortness of breath, that starts around day 5 to 7 when these inflammatory cytokines start rising. And you can see in this group of people, it's you same kind of course around day 5, but then it goes out of control and it can't be stopped. And that's why when you look down here, the therapies for this phase, or you can think of it as this is one disease and this is a second disease in a way, because you're going to be looking at this very differently in terms of treatment. You're going to be wanting to reduce inflammation. In this phase, you're going to be wanting to look at reducing viral replication. So you can see the viral shedding is here, but if you look at the virus detection, it can be detected for a very long period of time here, but it's not as infectious. So the infectivity kind of tapers off. And when by the time someone's in the ICU, they're not as infectious. They're just not shedding as much virus. So this is, just keep this image in your head, because I'm going to come back to that when I talk about treatments. So treatments. So outpatient treatments under investigation. This is important for the average everyday person. And I'll tell you why, because these are prescription. We're not going to talk about those. These are all over the counter. These are things that I prescribe for my patients all the time, regardless of COVID. So These three that have that are annotated here, so melatonin, zinc, and vitamin D, these all decrease with age. So what I do is I typically check levels. If I suspect someone has frequent infections, I'll check zinc levels, I'll check vitamin D levels, and I definitely replete those. For someone who's been exposed to COVID, it sometimes makes sense to empirically just give a couple doses of these things. These are very safe, very good safety profile, very well tolerated, and they're not expensive. So these are things that we have in our toolkit to prevent and even treat early infection with COVID-19. So these are other ones that have been studied, and they're also very safe. All of these are safe. This is the only thing, aspirin, you definitely got to be careful of. And all of these, I would say, contact your doctor, ask if it's okay to take these, because, sorry, some of them can actually interact with medications such as zinc, and certainly vitamin D. You don't want to be taking that for a very long period of time without having your levels checked. And famotidine, just a note, this is just Pepcid. It's an antacid used for reflux and gastritis and ulcers. The cautionary note with this one is you really need to be careful if you have impaired kidney function. And unless you do a blood test, you're not going to know if you have mild kidney impairment. So looking at what President Trump, his face got cut off here, he was actually given a cocktail when he was positive for COVID, including all of these things, because these are actually pretty well studied. The aspirin is thrown in because you develop a hypercoagulable state with COVID. And a lot of the symptoms people present with are related to clotting, such as stroke or heart attack. And so that's not a bad thing to throw into the mix. These really are typically reserved for very sick patients in the hospital. And it's not clear, they never really told us what his symptoms were. It sounded like he had mild early symptoms, but he seemed to respond very nicely to this cocktail. And my suspicion is that some of these were very, very helpful. So again, I'm not giving medical advice. I encourage you, if you are exposed, if you are high risk, talk to your doctor about potentially using some of these agents. This is a really nice website at Eastern Virginia Medical School. They have a protocol put out there for prophylaxis, mild disease. Even they have protocols on their website for hospitalized patients with severe disease. And it gives you doses. It tells you, their guidelines. B complex, I didn't have on my other list. This can be helpful if you have a deficiency. So again, I will check my patient's blood levels for B vitamins, but it's harmless for a short period of time. None of these things, if they're given for a short period of time, are going to do any damage. Ivermectin is a prescription, so that's definitely something that you would have to discuss with your physician. And then again, mildly symptomatic patients, very similar, slightly different dose for the ivermectin. You can find these online at the Eastern Virginia Medical School website. So just discussing the rationale behind each of these. Pepcid, this is just a really common antihistamine. It's an H2 blocker used for reflux and gastrointestinal issues such as ulcers and gastritis. Excellent safety profile, except you just do have to be cautious if you have impaired kidney function. It seemed to have antiviral properties. In 1996, it was being studied for use with HIV, and there was some mention of it being used with other antiretrovirals, but it kind of just people lost interest in it. But it does have some antiviral efficacy. And interestingly, in Wuhan, poor patients were noted to be doing better than the wealthy ones. And looking at it more closely, they looked at hospital records and found that people treated with the cheaper Pepcid were doing far better than the wealthier patients treated with the PPIs or the omeprazoles. And they noted a pattern significantly with lower rates of mortality and intubation with these patients. That was an observational study. And then in the US, we did some molecular modeling and found that, yes, Pepcid does seem to have affinity for 3 proteases involved in viral replication. And there have been some mixed results in trials, but for the most part, overwhelmingly positive results. And there are randomized controlled trials ongoing. Most of these mixed results they had limited trials, so they were observational, they were retrospective. They weren't, prospective randomized controlled trials, which is really the gold standard of trials. And then again, the mechanism is it antiviral? Is it, immune modulating because it prevents release of molecules from mast cells? It seems to do both, and we're not really sure. The jury's still out. So this is just the article we're talking about in silico analysis. So we used to hear in vitro, in vivo, and now we're hearing in silico, which is looking at computer models of chemical structures. And famotidine does show affinity for these proteases involved in replication of the COVID-19 virus. This is a small study that was done, I believe, in Long Island, looking at higher dose famotidine with 80 milligrams 3 times a day. And some studies have used 80 milligrams 4 times a day. Generally, the take-home message, it was well tolerated. All reported outcomes were improved with famotidine. Thing is obviously a very small study. I think they just wanted to do a starter trial to see what would happen and see how people tolerated the higher dose. And it was a very positive test. This is an observational study looking at hospitalized patients. So these were, definitely sicker patients past that initial just viral phase. So remember, the first part is viral replication and the second phase is inflammatory. And these people were beyond that. And so they too noted improvement with famotidine. And so again, these are just observational, not a great study. Another observational study showed that better outcomes with reduced risk of intubation or death with patient approval on famotidine. And some of these people were coming into the hospital on famotidine before even getting sick. So interesting, they didn't really differentiate. And another meta-analysis looking at famotidine with positive results. So vitamin D, another immunomodulator, it can actually calm down the immune system when it's overly angry, but it can also support the immune system when you actually need it to fight. And so that's really the key. And this is a common theme with all of these supplements, is they seem to modulate the immune system. They don't completely shut it down, but they allow it to work, but without getting completely crazy. So deficiency definitely decreases with age. It's just your kidneys just don't convert it to the active form as readily as you get older. Low levels were definitely associated with poor COVID outcomes, and typical doses. Usually, this is also in the Eastern Virginia Medical School protocol. So this is a study looking at nursing home residents in France. They got a bolus of 80,000 units, either right before they were exposed or immediately after COVID was suspected. And they definitely showed it overall mortality and symptom improvement with the vitamin D. So another study looking at low vitamin D levels being associated with hospitalization and mortality from COVID. Melatonin. So melatonin is another immunomodulator. So those are the good ones instead of completely shutting things down. It's an antioxidant. It's a free radical scavenger, so it may actually help with the cytokine storm as well. Levels tend to decline with age. It's been associated with a number of disease processes. Very well tolerated, very safe, and inexpensive. So melatonin is definitely something that a lot of people take and they have no problems with. Definitely talk about this with your physician if you're interested. Melatonin has been shown to have effects on both the innate and specific branches of the immune system, and it plays a regulatory role. Zinc is another very safe, very common supplement that people take, has been studied with COVID, seems to have anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects. It has been shown to be antiviral as well with HIV, hepatitis C, and coronavirus species. Seems to help with immune function with B and T cells, as well as a Th1 response, which is involved in kind of calming down that hyper exaggerated immune response. And we do see decreased absorption with age. So some of these things, all of these, the zinc, vitamin D, and what was the other one? I forget. They tend to decrease with age, which might explain in part why people over a certain age tend to have higher risk for COVID, or really any infection for that matter, for poor outcomes. And again, here's another article about poor outcomes with zinc deficiency in COVID. Glutathione, this is another over-the-counter supplement. It's an antioxidant primarily made by the liver. It does modulate the immune system, involved in detoxification. And it's something, this is not something that's commonly used. In my patient population, I do use it quite a bit because it's very well tolerated. And I sometimes use N-acetylcysteine or alpha lipoic acid which are N-acetylcysteine is the precursor to glutathione. Alpha lipoic acid helps maintain glutathione in its active reduced state. The reason glutathione is probably not commonly used is it's not well absorbed. You really have to use the liposomal formulation, which is a little more expensive, or use an IV formulation. And there are clinical trials using glutathione and COVID, specifically the IV form. Modified citrus pectin, it's another over-the-counter supplement. Again, it's a little more pricey, so this wasn't on my favorites list. But it does work it's a chelator of metals. It helps control cytokines. It kind of binds to things and it kind of gets it out of your system. It reduces inflammation, specifically working on these pathways. And it can help support T cell activity. So T cells are involved in viral control. So it can help act as a preventive and potentially as a kind of a mollifying factor for this inflammatory response, this cytokine storm. And it has actually been studied for use with various types of cancer and has been shown to be an anti-metastatic post-cancer treatment. So inpatient treatments, I'm not going to really go into any depth. These are the green, that's what the IDSA, the Infectious Disease Society of America, recommends for use in severely, different grades of severity in hospitalized patients. These, they say, do not use these. These have been associated with worse outcomes. And this is the monoclonal antibodies that President Trump used. This is very expensive and not widely available for people. And these are other ones under investigation. So now to the meat of our talk. A lot of people are wondering about the vaccines, plural, actually. So what is better, natural or from vaccine immunity? We really don't know for this particular, for COVID. Which is safer? The vaccine, for sure. Just as historical examples, pneumococcal vaccine, it definitely elicits a more robust immune response that's longer lasting than the natural infection. For mumps, the natural infection seems to work better. So it really, we really won't know until time tells us, and the data going forward will kind of inform us on this topic. So what vaccines are available in the US? So currently there's only one. Hopefully Moderna will be issued EUA soon, so we'll have two. They're very, very similar. Right now there's over 150 vaccines currently in development worldwide, and a couple in China, a couple in Russia are already being used. The 4 that are in phase 3 trials right now in the US, for US use rather, Moderna, which is an mRNA, very similar to Pfizer, Oxford, Astrazeneca, and Johnson & Johnson, both have adenovirus, and then there's this Novavax nanoparticle vaccine. These we're looking at maybe, this is soon, probably in the next week or two, we're going to see hopefully EUA approval or issuance. And this one, perhaps further down the road, maybe in the spring or late winter. Pfizer Biotech, so this is an mRNA vaccine, and I'll get into that in a minute because I think a lot of people are just kind of curious. This is a new type of technology, right? And they're wondering, why are we going to be shooting this into millions of people? Is this safe? And I think that's really the question everyone has. So just as an overview, so it's 2 doses, 3 weeks apart. It's about 52% effective after 1 dose. However, I heard a different number just the other day, and I'll show that in another slide. It's maybe even greater than this. 95% effective after 2 doses, which is unbelievable. That's fantastic. And really just minor adverse reactions have been reported. The problem with this one is it's very fragile. mRNA vaccines are inherently fragile, and it requires very cold storage. So this makes it very difficult to distribute. So these are just looking at the cold numbers of the study. And this is a New England Journal article kind of reviewing it and talking about the safety. And it generally, the summary says it's pretty much as safe as the vaccines we already have out there. So severe COVID-19 cases, 9 in the placebo group, 1 in the vaccine. Cases overall, 162 placebo, 8 vaccine. That's really good. And the other interesting and very important thing, those over 65 had a very good immune response. So 94% efficacy. So the reactogenicity, that means like the site where you get sore and red and you might get a fever the next day, really mild, moderate, and more common in those under 55. So the quote younger, I love that, younger than 55 is young. So this is something that typically, and I'll get into that in a second too. I have another slide on this topic, but it's really mild. And the people over 65 are not seeing that same kind of fever and all that stuff that we typically see in those under 55, but they still get that nice protection, which is great. Moderna, this is very similar efficacy, very similar safety profile. The data, the official data, it hasn't really been released and analyzed just yet. Over 30,000 people have been tested, so very similar numbers. And it requires cold storage, but not quite as cold. Oxford, AstraZeneca. This is an adenovirus vector. This is an old technology. We have several other vaccines that are like this, so nothing new there. The efficacy is up in the air. We really don't know. So they've been playing around with the doses. It seems that with the newer, lower initial dose, you get 90%. So it's actually really good. But they're kind of working on that, and they have ongoing phase 3 clinical trials. And it's the key thing with this vaccine is that it's designed for global use. It's a nonprofit. $2 to $4 per dose, which is great. And they really want to make this available to everyone in every country if they can't afford the more fancy. Moderna is about $33 per dose, and the Pfizer was about $20 per dose. So when you multiply that by the millions, you're looking at a lot more money. So, and then Johnson & Johnson is another adenovirus vector and possibly single dose. But it looks like there's a second study with 2 doses. I think they're trying to compete with the others and get up to the higher efficacy, because most vaccines are not 95% effective. It's unheard of. It's really, really wonderful. So this is going to be, we're going to be seeing this in the near future.
You might compare the 90% to what's the effectiveness of the regular flu vaccine.
So, I was actually going to look that up this morning and I ran out of time. I wanted to get a bunch of other vaccines that are out there. But in general, vaccines, you might see like 70, 80% efficacy, and that's good. Even the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine that we get, you really need to have herd immunity for those to work, because a subset of people are just not going to mount that immune response. So this is maybe as the numbers increase and we track people and look at the antibody responses to hundreds of thousands of people on these vaccines, then we might get a better picture of how efficacious it is in terms of eliciting that antibody response. So the numbers might shift a little bit, I'm guessing. So mRNA vaccines, the key take-home message is here: no risk of infection, right? This is just a little piece of a protein. It's not even, it's a little teeny little bit of protein that your body is going to be making itself. It does not enter the nucleus or affect the DNA of the host, us, when we get the shot. It basically it's an mRNA that tells our cells to make a harmless piece of spike protein. That little harmless piece of spike protein then goes out into our body, makes our immune system a little bit angry. We make antibodies, and then we have memory antibodies to, memory B cells to remember that the next time that we encounter COVID. And then we just, fight the infection before it even takes hold. Cells break down the mRNA very quickly. So this is not something that's going to be lingering in our system and causing problems down the road. And the other thing to note is the technology for mRNA vaccines has been around for decades. In general, there are a lot of advantages. It's faster and easier to make. And the other thing I was reading about last night was it can actually, you can combine different vaccines and put them all together and kind of you just have to be careful in terms of the immunogenicity. It might, irritate your immune system a little too much. But for overall, it's a very safe type of vaccine. It's a really nice option to have. And looking at the picture, it's a little blocked off, but it's basically you're just injecting the mRNA. The mRNA is, like a little lipid capsule. It's going to make its way into your cells, and it's going to trick your cells. And this, unfortunately, my thing is kind of blocked by our faces. But basically, the messenger mRNA is this little guy right here. It's basically the information from DNA. It's not DNA. It's going to be taken to the ribosome in the cytoplasm of cells. So it's not entering the nucleus. And it's basically just telling the ribosome to make these little teeny proteins. And it's going to be broken down very quickly within the cell. It's not going to last very long. Now, this is another topic, kind of shifting gears a little bit. This is how are we going to track people who have been vaccinated? The airlines have already kind of spearheaded this in terms of have you tested negative prior to your flight? So they already are trying to start this Common Pass app to track that. And they're potentially going to be using this to track the people who are vaccinated. It may be used by schools, summer camps, entertainment venues, et cetera. And it's just a historical note. In the 1880s, smallpox vaccination cards were used just to prove that people have been vaccinated. In the 1960s, the World Health Organization used yellow fever vaccine cards. So this is not new. This is not Big Brother, taking over the world and telling you, controlling everybody and monitoring everyone. This is just the practical implication of being able to fly and go to camps and things like that. The only problem is for those who may not be able to take the vaccine for whatever reason or may not have access to it, it may result in some level of discrimination. But hopefully once the COVID is under control, this will not be an issue. And here are the FAQs that were presented to me. I received a whole bunch of questions, then I kind of added a few here and there based on what I thought I would want to know. Which vaccine are we likely to receive? So it looks like we're going to be seeing the Pfizer at first, possibly Moderna in the near future, and maybe some of the others in the spring. Is there any protection after the first dose? Yes, we talked about that a minute ago. 14 days. This was provided at a webinar that I went to yesterday, and it had one of the FDA advisory committee members. And he said that after 14 days of the first dose, you're seeing 80% protection, which is fantastic. So I'm not saying don't get your second shot, but that's pretty darn good. And then the second dose, there's about a 95%, like we talked about. How long will it last? We don't know. The longest recorded period is about 2 to 2.5 months. It's not very long, just because we've only had this virus for less than a year. For the Pfizer vaccine, the dose has to be given 21 days apart. How exact does that have to be? This is on everybody's mind. They're like, well, what if I can't make it to my second dose? What if I don't, time it just right? Ideally, you should, on day 0 is the first shot, day 21 is second shot. But you do have a 4-day grace period. You can get that second shot on days 17, 18, 19, or 20. If it's any earlier, it doesn't count, just because it won't be counted as a booster, because it takes a certain amount of time for your body to make those antibodies, and you really need to have it after those antibodies are already present to kind of give it another boost. And then in general, if you miss that second appointment for whatever reason, and it's after 21 days, you're just supposed to give the second shot. You're not supposed to restart the series. So it'll still have efficacy, but the problem with this is doing it outside of what has been studied. We don't know the efficacy for those folks. So what were the adverse reactions reported? So injection site pain, redness, swelling, fatigue, headache, minor stuff that you can get with any vaccine. Fever, only a few people with the first dose, a slightly larger percentage with the second dose, and more frequent in those under 55. And really most symptoms resolved within usually the first day after, but up to 3 days after the vaccine dose. And this is really the question we all have. Were there any serious reactions to the vaccine? And I'm a skeptic. I'm fearful of long-term effects. What is there anything that we should be concerned about 10 years from now? That obviously has not been studied, but with this mRNA technology, it's not something that you typically would anticipate, although the immune system is something that is a little unpredictable because it's the immune system, it's kind of like a black box. But serious events were reported equally in both treatment and placebo groups. So you're looking at 0.6% for vaccine and 0.5% for placebo. So indistinguishable. And things like appendicitis, cardiac arrest, hemorrhagic stroke, these are things that were just happening in the background that were not attributed to the vaccine. Then, maybe one person with shoulder injury related to the vaccine administration. No deaths were attributed to the vaccine at all. And should both the vaccine doses be from the same pharmaceutical company? Yes, they've been studied very carefully for safety and efficacy, and you should follow the protocol as closely as possible. How do I know if I have a fever from COVID or from the vaccine? So the symptoms not associated with the vaccine include cough, shortness of breath, runny nose, sore throat, loss of taste or smell. The vaccine also does not cause a positive PCR test. So if you have a fever accompanied by shortness of breath, cough, or any of these things, then you should be concerned that maybe, yes, you have been exposed to COVID and that you may want to be evaluated. When will the vaccine be available to Carlisle residents? So this is a nice graphic from the mass.gov website. And you can see here in phase 1, this is happening right now. So hospital workers are already getting shots, fire, police, emergency, and healthcare workers working face-to-face with patients. And this is, so this basically should be happening before the 1st of January. So most people are seeing their vaccines in this like high risk group. Phase 2 is going to be people with comorbidities, people who are over 65, people in early education, also other people that are considered essential workers, but not quite in the emergency departments and the ICUs. So this is going to be happening in February and April. So hopefully in Carlisle, we're going to be having clinics for that population starting in February. That's our goal. And then phase 3 is going to be basically to everyone else. So that's going to be looking in the spring, April through June. And where will the vaccines be distributed? So for the most part, it's going to be at larger hospitals. Municipalities are going to be obtaining vaccines, and pharmacies are going to be distributing them at congregate settings such as nursing homes and prisons. In the spring and summer, it's probably going to be, later on, you're going to start seeing it rolling out at pharmacies and doctors' offices. But initially, it's going to be at mostly larger hospitals and via town clinics. And where will it be administered in Carlisle? So location is to be determined. We have discussed several locations, including Banta Davis, but we have not come up with a firm location just yet. This is just an image of the tent structure that we're looking to obtain with a drive-through capability so that people can come in even in the cold winter months and drive out, and it would be lower risk for workers as well as people coming through, residents coming through to get their vaccine. And should I take any pain medications if I get a fever after the vaccine? You can take Tylenol for fever and pain, but generally it's recommended you avoid NSAIDs because they may reduce the immune response to the vaccine. So in general, the redness, the pain at the site, the fever, fatigue, those are all really good signs that your immune system is working and that the vaccine is active. So that's just like anything else. You're basically, you don't want to be counterproductive and take an NSAID to reduce that. That's actually a really good thing. Do I need a prescription for a vaccine? No, you do not. Is the vaccine safe for pregnant or lactating women or women who want to become pregnant in the near future? This is something that came up at this webinar. People were very curious about this. This is not a population that has been studied, so we do not know. There were 23 women in the Pfizer trial who became pregnant after the vaccine, the initial dose. 12 were vaccine, 11 were placebo. So among these people, the 12 vaccine recipients, there were no adverse reactions reported. So we don't know the safety though. So that's something that would have to be studied in the future. And can vaccines be required? In the past, people could refuse a vaccine available under EUA since it is not FDA approved. So it looks like right now the EUA approved Pfizer vaccine, it cannot be mandated. Should I get a vaccine even if I've already had COVID? Most experts recommend getting the vaccine if you've had COVID, but we don't know how long the immunity lasts because we don't know how long the immunity lasts. If you've had COVID 6 months ago, it's probably a good idea to get the vaccine. If you've recently had COVID like last week or the week before, you may want to wait for about 90 days, but that's the recommendations for this are all over the place. I think the rationale for this, I don't think it's dangerous to get a vaccine. It's just that you'd be using up a vaccine that would benefit someone else if you're currently protected for at least 3 months or so. Will the vaccine be free? Yes, it will. Some hospitals or other distributors may charge processing fees, but other than that, it should be free. Will you provide documentation that I've had a vaccine? Yes, you will receive a vaccine card, and this is being blocked here, but this is an actual COVID-19 vaccination card from a doctor who already got vaccinated on the 14th. So you will receive a card and it will have a reminder for when you need to come in for the second shot. When can I stop wearing a mask? even if you've received a vaccine, you should still continue to wear the mask when in public until cases have declined significantly. The vaccine is really only part of an overall strategy to overcome COVID-19. And this may not be for another 6 months or even longer. So it's not a silver bullet, but hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel. So takeaway tips. This is something I just added because I thought it might be helpful for those of you, even though part of it you can't read. So if you are high risk, or maybe not, ask your doctor about the supplements discussed, even for prophylaxis and or treatment. So all of us living in this area are right now and living in this country or this world are at risk for COVID. So it's not a terrible idea to ask your doctor about potentially supplementing with vitamin D, for example, if you have a vitamin D deficiency. Consider getting a pulse oximeter. It's only about $15 online, or it's even sold. I saw it, I think, at Marshall's. They're sold at pharmacies everywhere. If your oxygen level is less than about 95%, you should call your doctor, because that's concerning if you have symptoms of shortness of breath, cough, and other COVID symptoms. Consider getting the COVID vaccine, and stay vigilant. Don't let your guard down on things until things improve significantly. Thank you.
Gene, we got a pulse oximeter and we use it every day, and it was very inexpensive and it's very easy to use. And it gives us a very quick readout as to whether or not we have any concerns. It's good advice. You know, one thing that I keep hearing about is herd immunity. And I guess I sort of understand what that means, but not really. What is herd immunity, and when will it take place in the United States?
So herd immunity is a term that's typically used for natural immunity. The people who are kind of anti-vaxxers, or if you're kind of you want to let things go naturally and let people just naturally become immune to it. The problem with that is, as we've figured out already, we don't really know how long the immunity, even the natural immunity, lasts. So if you do get infected, there have been documented cases where people get repeat infections, and it's not clear if it's due to their immune system or maybe even there's a potential mutation in the strain. It doesn't seem like there have been any major mutations so far since this first came out, last winter. But it's definitely a questionable approach to let things just go. As we've seen, the mortality rates are just unacceptably high to take on that approach. When you're talking about herd immunity with a vaccine, rather, you're usually looking at about 70% plus. So you really, and the same thing goes for measles, mumps, rubella, all these other vaccines that we receive as children. You really need a critical number of people in the population for a vaccine to be effective. Because there's always going to be people who receive the vaccine who don't respond necessarily. And it's unfortunate that if you do everything right, you do all your vaccines, and you still might get measles because it's very contagious. If somebody is an anti-vaccine person and they go to school and you can have these little pockets. So that's what herd immunity is, typically about 70%. That's a number that's thrown around a lot, but it depends on many factors. So it might depend on the pathogen that you're talking about.
That 70% number means over 200 million Americans would have to have it.
Well, that's why we're trying to kind of get the message out that this is a safe vaccine. It's certainly effective, and the numbers are there. I think there's probably a subset of people who kind of want other people to go first. Kind of like the zip line. When you're going on a zip line, you go first. You go ahead. Like people, you test it out and see if it fails. But the numbers. One of the things that were brought up at the webinar that I went to yesterday was this. Because COVID is so prevalent, it's so active year round, right? This is not like a flu where you have a flu season and you need to study a vaccine for 4 consecutive years to get the numbers. This is something, we have a lot of patients and a lot of numbers to look at, right? So the data is just piling in, and the numbers that we've used to study these vaccines is huge. These are really very encouraging, and for safety profiles as well. These are not small numbers. This is very reassuring.
Well, I'll be first in line. I can tell you that much, if I can get in line. Jean, thank you so much. This has been like drinking from a fire hose, but it's, I think your takeaways are what we should really be focused on. And I think we're just all glad that we're at this point where we can see some light at the end of the tunnel, and there is an effective and safe vaccine that's soon to be available to everybody. That's great. Thank you very much. Nancy, would you like to say a few words on behalf of the Friends? Now that I've got you in my radar here, you'll need to unmute, if you will.
Yep, there we go. Okay. Yes, that was an extraordinary presentation. Thank you so much, Dr. Berry. That was great. Oh, my computer. Okay, so first, I'm just going to talk about what's coming up. And we have the Art Appreciation Series coming up starting in January. It's earlier this year. This is the program that is the Art Appreciation that's co-sponsored by the Friends of the Gleason Public Library and the Friends of the Carlisle Council on Aging. And it will start January 27th with a presentation by Jane Blair, who is an artist and art enthusiast and an educator, and also the owner of Art Matters. And in that first one, she'll be talking about Vincent van Gogh and his tumultuous life and his brilliant work. They will all be at 1:30 on Wednesdays again this year. Then in February 24th will be the second program, and she'll be talking about the 4 ancient civilizations and the art that came out of those civilizations and how it has impacted contemporary art. And then finally on March 24th, she'll discuss 2 Impressionist painters, Claude Monet and Auguste Renoir, and talk about their life and their work. And so if you're interested, of course, for obvious reasons, they will be again on Zoom. And so if you want to register, you can go to the library website, the Gleason Public Library, or call the library in order to get the link for the Zoom link for the programs. I imagine that anybody watching this is very familiar with the Friends, but just in case you're not, the Friends began in 1994 with a group of people who were very interested in the senior community in Carlisle, and were interested in enhancing the offerings that the COA was giving. And so they organized the Friends, which is a fundraising group. And every year we give a grant to the Carlisle Council on Aging. And this grant has gone for things like fuel assistance and for food certificates for qualifying seniors, and for subsidizing exercise and fitness classes, for blood pressure clinics, and all kinds of medical equipment, underwriting medical equipment, and large print books at the library. So a host of services and things provided for the senior community. But this year has been a year like no other. The pandemic has turned everything upside down. And so our extraordinary COA has risen to the occasion, as they always do. And they've been able to take advantage of the sort of inherent flexibility of the Friends grant in order to deal with those unique circumstances that arose this year. And for instance, social events, which were given, our monthly socials that are a really important part of what the COA has done, have been changed into drive-through events where food was purchased for these events. And we knew that people had to stay connected to family and friends. And so they purchased batteries for laptops and keyboards and even a landline. And there were emergency situations. Of course, masks were purchased, but also emergency situations that are unique to this situation. this grant allows them the flexibility to pivot in order to deal with those extraordinary circumstances. And also the Friends were also able to provide extra monies this year to allow for other activities that the COA needed to do. And so it's a really important funding process for the COA. And that money comes from you. It comes from the Carlisle community. And we have been so overwhelmed by the generosity of our community, and we are so grateful to you. And we're asking you again this year to be able to join us in this effort to deal with certainly the circumstances that could come up in the next few months, but also for our ongoing efforts on behalf of this community. And so I hope you will join us in this effort. And again, thank you so much for all that you have done. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Linda, would you care to say anything for our session today?
Well, I want to thank Jean for just such great information. I thought I knew a lot about COVID and treatment and vaccines, but I learned a lot. Thank you, Jean. I just want to remind people that sometimes Carlisle thinks of ourselves as we live in a bubble. You know, we're Carlisle, we're our own small town. And we're finding with COVID, that's not the case. And we have had a dramatic increase in cases in town. And I want residents to know that the town is offering free testing. The Carlisle Emergency Services at the fire department. And there are some dates available this week and then also through the end of December. Unfortunately, I don't have the number to call to make an appointment, but it is on the town website. So people can call if they think they've been exposed to COVID, they think they have symptoms, if they're a close contact and they've been told to get tested, call the number on the website, make an appointment. And as I said, the testing is free. And that's through the end of December. And if we get additional funding, we hope to carry it even forward longer. But thank you again for everything the COA does for the town, and also Jean for great performance.
So I just put it into the chat that the COVID testing hotline is it's 978-254-1266. So I don't know if you want to put that out there, but yeah, let everybody know.
Very good.
Now you know why she's so good. I didn't think of that.
Angela, back to you for a minute.
Okay, so I know we're getting short on time, so I'm going to go very quickly and just tell you a little bit about what's coming. As everybody knows, most everything is virtual, and because of our not being able to do things in person, we are doing a music program, which Kerry and his granddaughter, I believe, participated in. So this will be premiering this weekend on Channel 8 and also be available starting on Saturday and up through January 23rd. It's going to be the Carlisle Intergenerational Music Show. We have various people, including Kerry and his granddaughter, and many other residents who performed, and we put it all together with the help of Minuteman Media Network. So you hopefully can watch something very pleasant. We have people from the community chorus and other organizations that are making wonderful music for your entertainment during the holidays. So check it out, please. We also have, and Chuck's very involved in this, virtual senior moments, which is on January 4th and 18th. And we do another coffee on Zoom with Shishi Ben Ingwin, and that is on January 12th. And Joan Ingersoll, our director, is doing an introduction to Mahjong. So if you'd like to learn about that, you can call the COA and get signed up for that. Carol, who's our new social worker, and she will be doing support groups online. So you can call the COA and get more information about that. And we have a program called Myths, Mysteries, and Spying with Henry Quinlan, who is going to talk about his experience with the Soviet Union. And that's on January 21st at 1 p.m. on Zoom. And again, call the COA at 978-371-2895 to get the links. We're having Mark Hopkins talk about the Walk the Thornfield in February on the 11th. And the National Charity League is joining the COA on February 17th for a drive-by gift bag. So you can call the COA to find more about that. We continue with our French conversation groups every week. Poetry is once a month with Mary Zoll. And the community book group continues on January 4th and February 1. And because this is a time of year that people need help with fuel assistance, the COA is doing lots in using state, federal funds, as well as the Salvation Army and resources through the Friends. So again, call the COA. We continue with our exercise classes.
Angela, you're muted somehow.
Okay, sorry. I don't know how that happened. So the exercise classes are tap, Zumba, Tai Chi, line dancing, fitness, cardio, and Sama, which is a based on martial art moves and helps with balance and flexibility. And we're doing distant Reiki. So if somebody would like to participate in that, we're doing that. We're still doing our podiatry clinics, but now we've moved them to Dr. Gregorian's office in Bedford. And if COVID stays under control, we'll continue with our haircuts at the fire station on January 25th, excuse me, which is a Monday. Chuck, do we have enough time to go on?
We're running a little over, but I think it's worthwhile, Angela.
Okay, so if people need transportation, the COA is still doing emergency or critical doctor's appointments, not emergency. And that is for any senior or any adult with disability. So if you have a critical doctor's appointment, we're still going to take you there if you call and make arrangements. And we do ask that if you come into town hall to pick up something or to visit someone, that you please check in at the desk and get tested to make sure that you are safe to go in and keep everyone there and everyone that follows you safely. So I think that's a quick rundown of what's coming. And I want to thank everyone, especially Dr. Barry. It was so enlightening, terrifying, but definitely enlightening, and good to see that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. So with no further ado, I'd like to say thank you all for those that participated in today. We hope that people watch this on Channel 8 as well as watch it on YouTube. And you can find the YouTube channel by either going to the Carlisle, the town website, there's a YouTube channel, or going to Minuteman Media Network and look under public and then under Council on Aging. So thank you all.
Angela, Chuck has afforded me the opportunity to have the last word here. And, you know, we're recording this on Wednesday, December 16th. This afternoon, although you'll be viewing this well after this has happened, but this afternoon people will be driving by at St. Teresa's to wish Angela a very happy and prosperous retirement. And thank you to Linda and Nancy and Dr. Barry. But I wanted to just have, this is a very bittersweet recording session for me, because you and I have worked together on many things for seems like a long time. And I wanted to, Chuck has afforded me an extra minute to read the following to you, Angela. This is a letter addressed from me to the program manager and outreach coordinator extraordinaire. It reads, we can't exactly remember when we first met you. It was probably at one of the monthly COA luncheons in Union Hall, where you were making announcements about upcoming events in a voice that even the hardest of hearing senior could hear and understand. Sometime later, after I was on the Friends board and got to know everyone a little better, I remember asking you about your work history and how impressed I was with your ability to organize and multitask so well. I believe it was your career at Digital that prepared you to be so effective at helping our growing number of seniors. That, plus a large dose of common sense, a high energy level, and a genuine sense of the importance of service to your fellow creatures. All of those attributes have made you the poster child for effective, dedicated leadership. The large volume of thank you notes that you've received over the years is testimony to how highly loved and respected you are, Angela. Okay, not enough of this adoration. So what are your faults? Well, let me count the ways. Foremostly is your absolute insistence on seeing things through until they are resolved beyond the wildest imagination of the party seeking help. Some would call it the extra mile syndrome. It must have been during one of your history lessons in elementary school that described a young Abe Lincoln walking a mile or two to return a penny to someone who had been overcharged by that amount. Or maybe it was a Bible story about someone giving you the shirt off his back. But these and other fables have made an indelible impression on the mind of a young Angela Bruno. Well, now I am stumped. I can't think of another fault, although I am sure you must have some. If you do, you certainly hide them well. When I heard that you decided to retire, I was surprised, concerned, relieved, all bundled together. Most of all, I was happy that you had made the decision to step back and smell the roses. Since then, I thought about how I reacted when I made a similar decision to retire. Once I had made it, I kind of checked out in terms of doing anything else that could have remotely been called productive. On the other hand, you have not blinked about it in terms of continuing to see things through until the last minute in December, when they take away your badge and escort you out of the building like they did when you retired from Digital so many years ago. When I asked you for help after you had announced that you were going to retire to organize a town event, you were right there with ideas, encouragement, sound advice, and you and Dana were physically there to make sure that the event was a success. You never checked out, and you won't until the last minute. You are a one of a kind, Angela. The town is ever grateful for your dedicated service, and we love you and wish you all the best in retirement.
I'm humbled and very appreciative, and thank you. I don't know what else to say other than I don't see myself in those slides, but I'm glad you do.
A virtual hug, and I'll see you this afternoon.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you in particular, Dr. Barry and Linda. Very much appreciated. Bye.
My pleasure. Take care, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.